Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Let's get started. Have a nice Sunday. First of all, let's start with this video where, I'm trying to meet a few of the requests you've made. In short, it's helpful. As for a little bit of emotional management, you know that I have been practicing mindfulness for years now. For me, the key is, but I realize that maybe many people, the approach, is not easy to do. You may run into many non-professionals who can teach you mindfulness in the most correct way. And also, the difficulty in the psychological approach to mindfulness could create some issues, which is why I decided to, let's say, create a sort of alternative ladder, in short, through the exercises that you can do, even without practicing mindfulness, to try to identify those mental patterns that our brain, puts into practice and that lead us to act. In short, inevitably, we always find ourselves making the same mistakes, always ending up in the same place. I prepared some slides, to accompany this discussion a bit. Let's get started. Here we go, just a moment while I get ready. The presentation, here it is. So how does our brain work? Starting from the study by Kahneman, who was the first Israeli psychologist to win the Nobel Prize in Mao 2002. It seems to me, for his work in behavioral finance, basically Kahneman established with his studies. So I invite you to read, if you want to dive deeper, the book by Kahneman, Thoughts, Read Fast Thoughts. Basically, with his studies, he was able to identify, patterns in the brain about how our brain works. First of all, what he was able to establish is that basically our brain has two seats, an instinctive seat and a rational seat. By its nature, the brain is lazy, it's lazy, so it tries to work as little as possible. This is also because imagine that the brain consumes approximately 20% of our body energy. Basically, it consumes a lot. And this means that every time it can save energy, bypass, without working. It does this, and how it does it is through mental patterns that have been structured in our minds through our life experiences. And they lead us to react in the same way to certain situations. To give you a simple example of a mental pattern is, for example, driving a car, riding a bike, walking, talking. These are all mental patterns. Our brain doesn't need to do anything special. In short, mental processes to do these things. We head towards it, we do it automatically as if they were apps that, so we turn to solve this super task of doing a routine job for 100, this, let's say, plays into our instinctive side. What happens is that, when we turn these things into action, we often find ourselves making the same mistakes over and over. Why does this happen? This happens precisely because when we are in situations of whether we have little time, stress, fear, or other, our brain tends to use these applications, these mental schemes, to solve these pressing situations that cause us anxiety. So, to escape to this feeling of anxiety, our brain applies its instinctive behavior and makes us act according to mental patterns that for certain situations, as we've seen, for example, inviting, walking, talking, are sufficient and useful, but when we find ourselves in situations such as in our lives where we shouldn't act on impulse, but rather be focused and carefully consider to make a decision we need to try not to let this instinctive part of us take over, because otherwise the consequences of our actions. We tend to make wrong decisions driven by fear and anxiety, and often these decisions are the wrong ones. In practice, our brain has thousands of years of evolution, but the last real evolution, the one that then set the stage to what we are today, is, and let's say it, the evolution had from Homo sapiens, and with the development of the neofrontal cortex, which is the seat of our rational thought. So when the brain, as we were saying before, becomes anxious, fearful, and stressed, how can it be to make a trading decision? I click, I don't click. I'm afraid to enter a position. So all these situations cause our brain to act instinctively and bypass the neofrontal cortex, which is the part we actually need and is necessary for making decisions. Rational. Think and elaborate. So all these situations cause us stress and make our brain react instinctively. So, for example, it can happen if we experience an attempted robbery, as mentioned before. These are the situations that bring out the instinctive part. So learning to recognize these steps, and when I took becoming aware of these actions, helps us identify what behaviors to avoid, to make sure to avoid always falling into the same traps. Everything in almost every aspect of and how our brain functions and operates. The good news is that, let's say, even though all these situations are hard to root out, the good news is that it is possible to do it, because our brain is plastic, and as has been shown, our brain can be shaped and restructured with specific exercises. It has been shown, I don't know if you know this, but our emotional part, so the instinctive part we've described so far, is managed by two glands that are at the center of our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala, it's basically a gland that's connected to our brain, and it comes into play in all the stages when we're under stress, so that it manages our emotional part. Well, the practice of mindfulness exercises, of breathing, done consistently. And over the years, it has been scientifically proven that they have led to a reduction in anxiety, and thus a connection of a person's instinctive reactions. So, the good news is this. You can definitely improve, in short, your approach. Let's move on. I repeat, this, can be done with mindfulness. It's clear that this journey I've tried to outline can also be done without mindfulness. But at the core, in my opinion, mindfulness has to be there. Let's move on. And let's take a look, at some steps to improve ours. In one, our cognition, our cognitive improvement. First of all, we need to try to increase our capacity for active listening, but by active listening, I mean an inner listening. So try to understand when these states of fear and anxiety are about to take over. And why do we need to do this? Because by identifying these compulsive patterns, whether it's the fear of clicking, or maybe clicking too much, because we're in a phase of cognitive regression. These are all phases that we need to try to identify. These are all phases that we can also identify, and it's what we do every day. How many of these compulsive habits do we all have, and do we encounter every day in all phases of our lives? We have so many. Do we all have them every day in all phases of our lives? We have so many. Think about those who, for example, eat too much, have weight problems, those who drink too much, those who do drugs, or even me, for instance, who smoke. It's definitely a compulsive behavior of mine that I'm trying to reduce and mitigate by changing certain behaviors that lead me to crave a cigarette. So in this regard, we need to try to work on it. And how can we try to work on it? We need to try to observe every time this happens, every time we feel fear, every time we feel anxiety, every time we're under stress. We need to try to detach ourselves and look at ourselves from the outside, meaning we should be observers, aspects of those phenomena that are happening to us. So, detaching from these patterns, external observation, and all of this will allow us to regain our control, emotional through rational thinking. Because if we look at ourselves from the outside, we can look at ourselves and rationally to see that we're exhibiting a compulsive behavior. It's not easy to do at all, but later I'll suggest some exercises to do so that this can be improved. The main remedy for all these aspects, to all these things that our brain does, obviously it's concentration. We all know what concentration is. Everyone, we can identify it. We can identify it. We know how to identify it. Closing, we can identify concentration, but are we really concentrated in that moment when we think we are? This happens because, if on one hand we have concentration, the opposite of concentration is mental wandering. That is mental wandering. And I can assure you that there are studies that have established that about 70% of the time our brain spends wandering. So just imagine how many things go through our brain. It's like if we, in our brain, we had, or one of its monkeys jumping from one topic to another. Without without a thread. How many times do you find yourself getting distracted? There are so many times when our brain just goes off on its own. How many times do you forget, for example, where you put an object? Maybe the car keys, the house keys. How many times do you maybe open a drawer, knowing that maybe what you're looking for is in another drawer, but you accidentally open the wrong one? How many times does it happen that you talk to someone and after finishing, in short, the chat, you forgot 80% of what they told you? Why does all this happen? Because if we had really been paying attention, would you have really forgotten all this? I wrote it there in red. If you had really been paying attention, would you have forgotten that maybe opening the third drawer, you would have found the socks and not the underwear, while you were looking for the underwear? Or that you had left the keys so on the counter in the kitchen instead of on the nightstand next to the bed. Why? Because in those moments, we're not focused. We're not in the moment. This happens. Let's move on. These things I repeat to you. These exercises that I'm suggesting to you, which I invite you to do, they're really meant to increase your ability to be present even in your daily habits. So try to do things with the utmost attention. When you speak, when you eat, pay attention to what you're eating. Sometimes maybe we sit at the table and you finish lunch or dinner, maybe, because you arrive with too much appetite, you eat quickly, you finish lunch, and you haven't even tasted what you've eaten. You can do the same thing while walking. Sometimes you walk down the street, but maybe you don't even notice of your step on the ground, of your step on the ground. Pay attention to how your foot rolls while you walk. You'll notice that it's a whole different thing. When you listen to someone, really focus on listening to their tone of voice, what they're telling you, what they're not saying with words, but maybe they're doing it with body language. If you start paying attention to all these things in your everyday life, you'll begin, first of all, in my opinion, to live in a completely different way, more aware, and it will help you not only in everyday life, but also consequently in trading. Okay, let's go a bit faster. Otherwise, the video gets too heavy. Trading is a structured job, so to operate effectively, trading must always be completely at 100%. It needs to synchronize with the only relevant dimension, a relevant storm, that is the present, the moment, here and now, as I always tell you, hic. If we're not present in the moment, we're vulnerable. If at the moment we're clicking, you start thinking about a past trade or a trade to make or anything else that crosses your mind. At that moment, you become vulnerable. So, staying focused on you, what we're doing is the key to everything. Here, and now, I repeat, hic, is the only thing we should be concerned about. Staying in the present moment without, I repeat, dwelling on past trades or anticipating future ones. These are key fundamentals. There's another fundamental focus to remember always. The key variables of the day. Keep track of important levels mentally. Remember the operational strategies related to those levels. And act with speed and determination. All of this can only be given to us by focus. It's also true that our brain doesn't, let's say it can't stay focused for 24 hours, but what mindfulness can teach you, along with all these exercises, as I've mentioned, in everyday life, doing things mindfully, focusing on brushing your teeth, taking a shower and being there, feeling the water on you and not thinking about what to do. I have to go to the office, I have to do this, I have to take the kids to school. No, just be there and live that present moment. Feel the water flowing over you. Being there with yourself, it's in these things that you need to apply mindfulness. And then, through these things, you can carry it over into trading, and you will definitely improve and aim to become super efficient super traders. Obviously, this is not something that happens overnight, and above all, it doesn't happen naturally. You need to make an effort. And mindfulness is definitely a powerful tool to help you do that. So, let's say the exercise to do, and you can see it here in the slide, is to list all the physical and mental states when you are deeply focused. That is, when everything is going well for you, when you are in the flow. Maybe with the market, describe it completely, from how you sat on the chair, what things you thought, if there were any little thoughts that maybe surfaced, because this is inevitable. but you manage to keep them at bay. What did you have for breakfast? How did you sleep at night? There's the checklist that I've made available to everyone, which you can fill out daily, because just by doing it every day, you'll know in advance if it's a day when you can expect to perform well, because your physical and mental state affects this. And you need to, first of all, and especially then, to go on to describe even the moments when these things didn't go the right way in detail. What is it that you did wrong? What were you thinking in those moments? There were external disturbances. You had slept well. What did you eat? You need to note down every single thing. The more detailed your description is, the better. You'll be able to identify which compulsive patterns repeat in your days. Negative. And this will lead you, by doing the checklist, to be able to eliminate completely, because you'll be able to identify it right from the start. The problem, the pattern that's emerging and will lead you off track for that day. Okay, the reasons that lead us, well, to not often lose focus. What are they? There's physical fatigue, because as we said before, we can't expect to be focused 24 hours a day. What can it be from a poor diet, from a natural tendency to distraction, and also from a lack of motivation when trading? Beyond, or we can even use distractions on purpose. Our brain can use distractions on purpose to not making decisions to avoid trading. Ah, darn, I got distracted. And I was there, and I was there, and I was there, and I was really there, and I couldn't follow that trend. Did you see? Then it went just as I thought. These are all reasons. These are all tools that our brain uses to avoid making decisions, so learning to recognize these patterns will help you overcome them. Multitasking. How many chats are you in at the same time? Sometimes during the day, the phone or the news sites, they're all sources of distraction, that we often use to escape from making decisions. So learning to buy every time you lose, it's often because you keep going to the same site to waste time or get distracted. Identifying this. When you find yourself on this site, you'll know in advance that's a day when you probably shouldn't be trading. You'd be better off not trading because you're not focused, you're not at 100%. And as I always tell you, if we're not at 100%, we shouldn't be trading. It's like wanting to step into the ring with Tyson without being physically and mentally prepared. It would destroy us in 10 seconds. And that's what happens to you every time you go into the market and you're not adequately prepared and present at 100%. Okay, as I told you, to solve all these problems, you can put these exercises into practice and pair them with a bit of meditation. It's the only thing that I can suggest you to do, because meditation is exactly this. Even that simple breathing exercise that takes you 10 minutes a day is something that everyone can do to practice continuous focus. Focus on focus. Focus on focus. Me too. You see that? I respond to everyone in the chat, but I still manage to have, I don't know how to perform important because I can, because at the moment when visually, I see what I want on the chart, what I had prepared. I stop doing anything else I'm doing, and I focus on what I need to do. And I go into focus. Then, after that, I get distracted, but that's natural because the brain needs to do that. And maybe I respond in the chat, I post a started thread, now managed, because I no longer need to be focused on 1,000%. Okay, to use in short, one on a euphemism in short. Let's move on. I repeat, another aspect you need to consider well is the loss of motivation, because at the beginning, trading is always a standalone activity. It's against nature. So, if we're not adequately motivated, this turns into negative days. But motivation isn't just me. Maybe, we all aim to improve ourselves, to be richer, to want to do, and to want to say, but why do you get stuck? Because there are mental processes that lead you to self-sabotage. Self-sabotage. Like self-harm, which is even worse, actually wanting to hurt yourself. Compared to self-sabotage, the fear of facing the disappointment of failure, doubts about our abilities, the worry that the achievement of the goal will not bring those desired improvements, all of this means that we adopt these mental patterns to escape from everything. Meditation would help you recognize all these patterns, avoid them, and improve yourself as a person and as a trader. However, I repeat, this path developed with these exercises to be done in daily life can absolutely help you to be more aware. So, these are the exercises. The real-time newspaper, more detailed, the post-trade analysis, the detailed description repeatedly, the mistakes you make, mark the wrong trades on the chart, and always visualize them in your mind so you don't repeat them. Try to lose, to repeat these exercises, repeat them constantly. Write down everything, and you'll see that every time you lose, you always repeat the same parts. Once you've learned to identify them, you know that you shouldn't repeat them or find yourself in those situations. With this, let's say we've reached the end. I hope you can see me right now. I wish you a good Sunday. I hope you liked the video, and we'll see each other again in the chat. Of course, tomorrow. Today is Sunday. I'm going to lunch with my family. Thank you all again for your attention.